Hey, welcome to Loonie Tree. If you're living in Canada and you're looking for the easiest place to learn about setting up a budget, stay tuned, because that's exactly what today's video is about. Budgeting can feel like a dirty word in personal finance. What it sounds like is a whole bunch of stuff that I can't or maybe shouldn't buy. And that can trigger feelings you might rather ignore. But the truth is, budgeting should be about what you can buy. It's about being able to take that trip, or buy that home, or just not stress about rent due every month. Part of this misconception may come from dumb conversations we sometimes have about money. You may have heard this one. Kids today can't afford houses because they spend recklessly on things like $5 coffees. $5 for a coffee may sound a little expensive, but comparing 50 $5 coffees to a $200,000 down payment on a $1 million house is silly. That's just not budgeting. That's purchase shaming, and it's not fun. Budgeting is about the larger pot, and while cutting out frivolous spending can be helpful, focusing on the bigger picture is a better place to start. Budgeting is really about two sides of the same coin. Usually, we think about the planning and tracking first, and there's two main ways to do that. Do it yourself, using a spreadsheet or maybe pen and paper, and an application, like Mint, for example, software. Both have merits and drawbacks, and we'll get to these in a sec. Really, what is even more important than tracking is executing on a budget, and this is often the real struggle. Executing has only been made more difficult with the emergence of e-commerce and the digital economy. Debit, credit, e-transfers make payments easier than ever, and that's a good thing. But this also creates unique challenges to budgeting, as the convenience sometimes makes it difficult to control your spending. Execution is about discipline. And sometimes, seeing tangible evidence, like cash leaving an envelope, is still the best reminder of how much money you have left in your budget. If this sounds like you, the envelope method may be the best pick for executing on your budget. So what is the envelope method? Well, under the envelope method, you create envelopes for major spending categories. Rent, groceries, phone and utilities, car payments, debt payments. You choose how detailed you want it to be. You fill the envelopes at the start of the month with your allotted amount for each category, and then pay out as the month goes on. One of the best parts of executing to this budget is that the envelopes make it very difficult to overspend. And it's especially good for small budgets, like an allowance, for example, or if you're trying to budget while on a trip. There's some downsides though as well. First and foremost, you're going to need to get out and use cash. On top of that, unless you're holding on to receipts, itemized tracking is going to be a little bit more difficult. That just means it's a little more work to understand how you spent the money from every envelope. If you don't like the sounds of the envelope-based budget, there is an alternative. Zero-based budgeting is very similar, but in this case, your quote-unquote envelopes are digital. For this method, you take your monthly income and break every dollar down into a bucket. These can include all the buckets we talked about before, like groceries and rent, but could also include saving goals and discretionary spending. Not everyone wants a budget that has that level of detail, and some people prefer to use a 50-30-20 split. For really general zero-based budgeting, 50% of their budget would go to their needs, 30% would go to their wants, and 20% could go to saving or paying down debt. But a budget needs to fit your needs, and it can be as detailed or as general as it's helpful. One thing that's probably really obvious to you right off the bat is zero-based budgeting works better for digital payments. Because money is coming out of your accounts the same way it would whether you're having a budget or not, sometimes this can feel less restrictive. However, on the flip side, it also makes it harder to track. The combination of the less restrictive nature of this budget and allowing for multiple payment options can make it a little bit more difficult to understand how the money is leaving your account and where it's going. At this point, you might see why we focused on executing your budget before we talked about tracking it. Both methods of execution line up better with a different tracking method. It's always fine to mix and match, but pen and paper, or the spreadsheet style, is better suited to track the envelope method, mostly due to its simplicity. However, the trade-off for that simplicity is it's a little bit more work to get detail. That can mean managing receipts, and it might require weekly check-ins that can take time. Similarly, the app shines in its ability to account for detail in electronic transactions across multiple payment options and bank accounts. This makes it uniquely suited for the zero-based or 50-30-20 method. Some of the benefits that come along with using the app for tracking and planning are slick presentations like month-to-month comparisons and transaction level details. These details, and what makes the app sometimes so easy to use, is the ability to link your accounts directly to the application. Because of this, when you're setting up your budget, the app can actually suggest amounts for you based on the activity that it's already seen in your accounts. On the flip side to that, there are some people who aren't as comfortable with technology, and this might not be a great option for them. The app is using your data to make some of these suggestions, and while that is autonomized, privacy is a concern for some users, and we recognize that. Often, the hardest step in budgeting is taking the first step. To wrap up, let's look at the 3 stages and how to quickly get started on any budget. Number 1, planning. Do it yourself or using an application. You need to choose the level of detail that you're aiming for on your first budget. Will you leave it as high level as grocery spend overall for the month? Or will you go as detailed as daily expenses? 2, execute. Do your best to stick to the plan and stay disciplined. But don't worry, you may need to adjust after the next step. That's totally to be expected. And 3, tracking and adjusting. Take a look at what's working and what's not. You may not nail it on your first go, but getting started is the only way to learn and to get better. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this video helped you evaluate some of the well-known options to budgeting. Still have a few minutes to learn more? Check out some of our other videos for simple, straightforward tips on Canadian personal finance. Bye for now.